This next session is going to be great because we're going to get down and into the nitty-gritty about some recipes for success. So I'm going to introduce our panel first, and then I'm going to sit there and ask them some questions. Now, I happen to be very close to quite close to the three panel members sitting this end. So Peter's new to me, which is great, because then I can ask you really embarrassing questions and you won't mind so much. But I want to start this end, of course, someone who may be known to many of you very well, Professor Emma Johnston from the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences. And I've been privileged to work with Emma at the Sydney Institute of Marine Science, where I'm on the foundation board, and I think Charlie Schutram, the chair, is here today as well. So Professor Emma Johnston is, of course, a marine ecologist at BEES, investigating the ecology of human impacts on marine systems. She's the inaugural director of the Sydney Harbour Research Program at SIMS, and her numerous awards include the 2012 New South Wales Science and Engineering Award for Excellence in Biological Sciences, and in 2014, Emma was the inaugural winner of the Australian Academy of Sciences Nancy Millis Medal for Women in Science. She's doing just amazing, outstanding work. It's a great pleasure to have worked with her at SIMS and to see the way in which she gets scientists to collaborate so well together. My next victim on the stage here is none other than Professor Merlin Crossley, the Dean of Science here at UNSW, and for his sins also Merlin serves on the Australian Museum Trust Board and was on my interview panel, which I'll never forgive him for. So he's been here in this wonderful role since 2010. He's a molecular biologist and has studied or worked at the universities of Melbourne, Oxford and Harvard, and the University of Sydney, where he was acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research from 2006 to 2008. He's won numerous awards, of course, including a Rhodes Scholarship and the Australian Academy of Sciences Gottschalk, am I saying that right, Gottschalk Medal? His research focuses on the fundamental molecular mechanisms by which genes are controlled. He's just an extraordinary individual, as I'm sure you all know. Sitting next to him is another member of the fold, Dr. Rebecca Johnston, of course, who is the director of the Australian Museum Research Institute, and Rebecca now oversees a team of 70 scientists and another 30 or so support workers in our research institute in the city. She's a molecular geneticist and was appointed director in April this year. Since joining the museum back in 2002, she's established it as a global leader in the field of wildlife forensics through accreditation of the museum's Australian Centre for Wildlife Genomics. She is one of only 2 experts appointed by the federal government as an examiner in wildlife forensics, which means she can go to court and give evidence, and you should see some of the fun pictures we have of where men particularly smuggle various things in their underpants. Rebecca was co-leader of the Koala Genome Consortium that determined the genetic sequence of the koala to assist in its conservation, which means that study, of course, and being able to sequence the DNA of the koala first time was international front page news around the world a couple of years ago. In 2014, she was admitted to the Australian Academy of Forensic Science, and we were thrilled to be able to appoint someone who'd worked at the museum for such a long time, who'd chosen a career in museum science to lead the Research Institute in the future, and she's a fantastic collaborator as well. And last but not least, Peter Lovibond, Deputy Dean of the University of New South Wales Science Faculty. He's a psychologist, and I tell you what, that talk we just had, thank you so much, on the psychology of this, I found amazingly interesting. He studied or worked at the University of New South Wales, the University of Sydney and the University of Cambridge, and was head of the University of New South Wales School of Psychology from 2002 to 2008. His research focuses on the role of cognitive processes such as reasoning and expectancy in human associative learning, and his applications to clinical disorders such as anxiety and addiction. Peter is a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia and the co-developer of a self-report measure called the Depression Anxiety Stress Scales that assesses the severity of these psychological states. which is very relevant in this day and age for sure. So we are going to have now a great chat with the four of these outstanding scientists to get down to the nitty-gritty of their tips for how their careers have flourished in this way and how to progress. So I'm just going to take a seat for a second. Come over here. I want to make sure I can... It's all right.
Hello.
Hello, Emma. This is oh, that was odd. This is great fun. So I'm not going to start with you though, Em. Oh. No, you can wait. I want to start with Peter first. Because something I noticed when I was introducing you all, both Merlin and Peter have both spent big chunks of their academic career progression overseas. So Peter, do you think that's an important part of your career development in academia?
Yeah, I think if you can manage it, an overseas stint, can really kickstart your career, and the obvious time to do it is immediately after your PhD, the postdoc period, because it exposes you to new ideas, I guess. It gives you international experience and visibility, boosts your publications. I think also if you can do that at that time, it can, well, let me back off. I think there's evidence that, in terms of today's topic, that women are less likely to take postdocs, and if they do, they're less likely to travel further away from their home institution. So I think if we can somehow address that imbalance, we could go a long way towards addressing the sort of leakage problem that Lisa alluded to, that progressive difference in the career paths of women in science.
So what age are you typically when you do your postdoc research?
So you'd normally be mid-20s, and I think, even if you can't go overseas at that point, it's great to move labs, because that demonstrates independence, it exposes you to new ideas. Probably taking any research position is better than going into a teaching heavy position for fairly obvious reasons in terms of your productivity. And there are so many sort of positive feedback loops in science whereby you won't get a grant unless you have publications, and you need the grant to get more publications. So once that process starts, it tends to keep going. But if you don't kickstart it with a good period of research productivity, or if you get interrupted later on, then it can be very hard to sort of get back on track.
So that doesn't really support the whole idea of having your children a little bit younger, does it?
That's a choice, I guess, that people have to make. But what we can do is try to put interventions in place to minimise that impact. And we've tried to do that within the Faculty of Science. I think Catherine mentioned the June Griffith Fellowship earlier. We have other ones for career interruption through caring and so forth. That's one mechanism that we've tried. Yeah.
Interesting. Now, Emma, because you are a mum and a scientist as well, and I know you've made various decisions through your career, can you tell us a little bit about how balancing work and family life with your career as a scientist, how that, is that a factor that can inhibit your career?
Yeah, yes. Hello. Yes, absolutely it is. And, oh, I love microphones. I know. So, and just building on what's just been said, I did exactly the opposite to what you're meant to do. So I would refuse to move because I had a partner. I went straight into associate level A, heavy teaching for almost a decade, and I survived. So I guess one thing to keep in mind is that there are other ways of making it. But one thing that's very important that we need to change is that the people at the top who are making the judgments about who gets those jobs are saying, oh, you haven't had an overseas trip, well, you can't be a great scientist. So it works both ways. We need to change those judgment calls because it's not true. I don't see any evidence to accept that. It is true that you need to get experience in other labs. You can't just work in one frame of mind, and I think that's what Peter was pointing out. But you can get those experiences in small chunks. You can get those experiences through collaborating internationally without even getting out of your seat. And so it's about accepting a whole range of different models for making those changes and enabling people who don't want to move or can't move to still have these exciting research careers and to be able to build their knowledge and their understanding. So with regards to the kids though, that is still really, really tricky. And we know that women do more of the caring. Statistically, we know also that they are far less likely to have a stay-at-home spouse. And so we also know that the work structures, particularly in academia, male academics are very, very likely to have, I think it's something like 70% of them, have a partner who stays at home or works part-time. So we're sitting actually in a situation where the culture and the competition is very, very high, and the pressure to work loads and loads of hours is very, very high. And working around that is difficult. It's about also, I guess, bringing the maternity leave back in for men so that men actually start to take more of that caring role. And it's also about allowing structures that get women back in once they have had children. Now, I was very sneaky. I scheduled my children for my heaviest teaching semester. Don't tell my head of school. So, I mean, there are things that you can do as an individual to try and make sure that you can keep your research going. And also, one of the things I like to think about is while our lives are getting longer and longer, children's and babies, they're very short. You know, they're literally quite short, and they stay young for a very short amount of time. So keeping in mind that you've got this great big long life, it's okay to say, okay, for these few years, it's just going to be work and family. I'm not going to get to read those novels. I'm not going to get to go to the movies. It's okay to have a little bit of imbalance at that point, as long as you're thinking about the whole duration of your life and all of those books that you'll get to catch up on when the kids don't even want to know you anymore.
But, you know, Emma, you're right at what I would consider at the top of the tree in marine science, and you've managed to sort of work out that balance for yourself. Have you ever thought though, oh, I just wish I could have gone overseas?
Yes, I do regret not having had those opportunities. However, and it's changed the way I've done my science. My science has had to be built up from zero cash through only being really, really nice to my students, because, you know, and that made me a more collaborative researcher, and that was a good thing. You know, I didn't have any money, I couldn't buy anything, I didn't have a support system around me, so I just worked with the people I had. And those students are amazing. You know, they are dedicated, they're self-motivated, they're bright, and they're going on to do incredible marine science right the way around Australia now. So I'm up to, I think, 14 PhD graduates and something like 45 honours students that I've had over a 10-year period or something, and I don't regret any of that. I try and make them go overseas when even though I didn't. So I do try and not to practice what I preach, or to, what's the reverse of that? I can't work it out. So yeah, you do regret those things, but on the other hand, I have a really happy family and 2 gorgeous kids, and I've really enjoyed my research career, so I can't say that it hasn't worked for me.
Kim, can I just echo
Sure.
Catherine Greenhill's point that, you know, the other way to achieve this is through this, at least for scientists in universities, is through the sabbatical process, which is a great opportunity to do that.
So we actually did the data for UNSW for 3 schools. It was a project, gender equity project, on who's taking sabbaticals, and physics, optometry and the School of Biological Sciences. Women take maternity leave, men take sabbaticals. And that was absolutely across the board the situation, which Helen was involved in that particular study. And so I think that is a real problem, is that often women have partners who are working full-time who cannot get away. And so they don't actually do the sabbaticals either, and I know that I'm in that situation.
Very interesting. Now, Merlin, because you're the Dean of the school, you, I know, are looking at this all the time. How, you know, is there a need to balance the teaching load and the research load to, you know, how does that impact on your career progression?
So yes, this works. So yes, this is an issue at the university. So the university essentially is financially sustainable due to its teaching, but historically achievements in research are what are recognised, gives a reputation of the university, and the individual career advancement of academics is disproportionately due to people's achievements in research. And I think at this university and others, women make a disproportionate contribution towards teaching. And that's something that, and what Lisa's comments were very interesting about sort of self-reinforcing stereotypes. It keeps happening because it is the norm and no one really questions it. So what I think we have to do is encourage women to signal that they are properly prioritising research and teaching and getting the sort of balance. When I was a young academic, I had very good mentors who essentially told me which way was up and I should focus on research and I should signal that I was focused on research. I was out there, I was doing that. And people didn't even overload me with teaching. I didn't have to push it back. The stereotype worked in my favour because that was the established stereotype. And we have to make sure that it's not an established stereotype and make sure that the teaching is spread evenly. Now, how successful we'll be in that, I hope we will be successful. One of the things we're trying to do is make sure people can be promoted through the quality of their teaching. That has been challenging for universities because there is no accepted way of assessing quality of teaching. Having said that, there's no accepted way of assessing the quality of anything, actually. So, but I think we've now got electronic methods of assessing student satisfaction extremely well, potentially, better than ever before, and we can at least measure that. So we can also promote people more through teaching, and that's another thing we can do. We also have to improve the opportunities for women to do research and celebrating the fact that women can achieve in research, are achieving research, and also are achieving even if they don't go overseas. And I do just want to go back to that point. When I was a student, I heard Paul Nurse talk. You'll know Sir Paul Nurse now. He won a Nobel Prize, head of the Royal Society. And he made a big point that he had succeeded in his career without leaving England. Now, that was a big thing for him. He said, I'm one of the few people who succeeded without going to America. And we sort of think of it, we've got a cultural
George Bush became president without having been anywhere else either.
So, he's another exception. But I think what I would say is that there's a sort of golden path. And if you don't take that golden path, your probability of success is slightly less, but it is not zero. And so if there's anyone out there who says, you know, look, I did spend too much time on teaching, I didn't go overseas, I haven't had a sabbatical, I may as well give up. You shouldn't necessarily give up. Your success, the chances, you know, I'm not going to say it's easy, but there are people who succeed, so don't give up.
Very true. I think that goes for anything, doesn't it?
Well, sometimes you should give up.
Some people should go. Is he trying to tell me something?
When I'm in an argument with you,
Moving
Kim,
on,
sometimes I give up.
So, Rebecca, when you know, I find academia fascinating because it's very structured and quite strange, really, compared to the real world, sometimes with writing papers and how everyone gets credited on a paper and the hierarchy of that and the, you know, literal points you might get in life for where you're scored on those papers and so forth. Has that, do you think men are better than women at getting credit on papers?
They have a different approach in my experience, but everyone has their own approach. And perhaps I want to rewind a wee bit, as we're a very academically focused panel, but often I am invited to come and speak at various things, but often as a presentation of an alternate academic career, because despite us being the second oldest scientific institution in the country, the oldest, the CEO is with us today, Kim Ellis from the Royal Botanic Gardens. So despite that, we're often considered not your traditional academic pathway. And so while we are concerned with a lot of the things that universities are also concerned with, everyone wants to publish in high-ranking journals and get research grants, there are many other things that you can do with the science background and engineering background for that matter. And I think just listening to the incredible speakers that we've had today, and I think probably the whole panel and hopefully everyone in the whole room, what binds us all together is that we all think we have the best job in the world. And I certainly think that, even though now I spend a large chunk of my time managing over 100 people, and I think that I have 3 different things that I say are kind of core to success. Number 1 is working really hard. You cannot get around that. Number 2 is making sure that you surround yourself with excellent people, particularly good mentors. Every great thing that's happened if you reflect on great things that have happened to you, possibly they've been facilitated by a great advocate, either in the background or perhaps even quite vocally. And thirdly, life is too short to collaborate with people that you don't like. And, and collaboration is also something that we've heard a lot about today. And when I have a lot of close friends, the Women in Science Network is critical, and it is wonderful to surround yourself with inspiring women from your own area. And they are increasing in numbers. And something that is common is the need to collaborate in all science, really. And us being geneticists, Merlin, we know that pretty much most of what we do relies on many, many different brains in many, many different disciplines. And collaboration is a really great way of working within your network, and also leveraging on what no one can achieve such things alone anymore.
And I think that goes for most things generally, not
Very
just
much.
working in science. But you've just sort of moved from doing pure science, running the Australian Centre for Wildlife Genomics at the museum, into this more focused management role, even though fortunately you still get to do some of your science as well.
Thank you to you.
Thank you to me. But, you know, how do you think it's important to seize those management opportunities? Because sometimes the disciplines that make a good scientist aren't necessarily the same skill sets that make a good manager.
Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes they're the complete opposite, actually. And I think that I never thought that I would be doing what I'm doing in this form, but every day I think that my job's better than the day before. So it really is about taking opportunities, or recognising that window that's opening that might become an opportunity, and backing yourself to jump through it. And being confident that you have the training, you have the skills, you have the ability to learn new skills if you need to, and jump through that window. And I think perhaps one thing that I did reflect upon when I was invited to be on this panel was something around unconscious bias that a lot of what Lisa said very much resonated with me. And it's around the employment of young people, particularly in science, on soft money. And if maternity leave does appear on the horizon, soft money can run out in the middle of a maternity leave break, and no one really even notices it. And this is something that when I was back doing a much more focused area where I was just looking after DNA, we had a staff member who was on soft money, who was going on maternity leave, and her contract would have finished in the middle of that maternity leave. And it was the first time I'd ever been confronted with that situation. And this was an extraordinary staff member who is still with us today. And she was just expecting that we wouldn't continue her contract, and that she would kind of have no job halfway through her maternity leave, and hopefully something great would come up when she was able to come back to the workforce. So this was something that we discussed in our group, and I'm thrilled that several of those people are in the room today. And the other thing is that the entire amount of leave is not covered, and so for someone to take their leave, it was actually we were paying their salary so that they could take the leave, which they absolutely should take. But we weren't able to fill the position. So we came up with the solution that we'd all just cover the extra jobs during this period of time and extend her contract beyond the leave period, so that we were actually paying for someone not to be there, because it just didn't feel right that someone would not have a contract just because they'd gone off and had a baby. And it does come back to this unconscious bias that if you're not aware of it, if you don't remind yourself that these things can happen, they just happen and life moves on.
That's right. So you were very deliberate in doing that, which is terrific. Peter, what about you? Because, I mean, as the Deputy Dean there, obviously you're focused on a lot of the day-to-day management there as well. How important do you think it is for scientists to be aware of management skills and training?
Great skills to have. You wouldn't want to take on too onerous a management position too early in your career, but there are always, administrative sort of jobs you can do that teach you about how to run meetings, how to negotiate, how to deal with difficult colleagues, write position papers, that sort of thing, that are going to increase your opportunity to take those more senior positions later and increase your influence, pretty much whatever you do, I think.
Yeah, so I think, but that's very demanding, isn't it? Because if you've got a research load and a teaching load, and then someone says to you, oh, you've got to go off and learn all these other skill sets as well, there's not much time left, is there?
No, but if you do it in a planned way, I think you can fit it in. And another piece of advice I would have is not to do the same role for too long. Particularly if you can achieve something tangible, move on to another role. It'll give you broader experience and it will lengthen your CV at the same time without ever dominating what it is you're doing. You're still focusing on your core science.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Emma.
I don't know if I need this. Just building on that, one of the few confidence building things I've done. So I've struggled with confidence to become a science for all at every stage. So I didn't think I could do honours, and I didn't think I could do a PhD. Then when I got my job, I didn't think I could teach, and then I didn't think I could get a grant, and then I didn't think I could get promoted. And at one point I remember telling my head of school, who must have just thought I was mad, look, if I get to senior lecturer, I'll be really happy. And I was talking about my whole career. And so one of the things I think women struggle with a lot is a lack of confidence, and it's partly because the role models aren't there. We know from many, many social science studies showing that if there are not people in front of you in those positions that you can identify with, then your confidence drops. So that's part of the reason. There are many, many other reasons, but one of the things that helped me with confidence was actually doing some of these management courses, because they helped me realise that I had the skills already, that not everybody has to lead the same way, and that you can just build on your own skills and techniques, recognise them for what they are, and then actually go out there and use them a little bit more confidently, and bingo, you've actually got them already. And that only took a couple of days of formal training for me to recognise something that possibly would have taken me 20 years if I'd just done it by trial and error.
Very good point. I think what I'm hearing from all of you is the importance of mentors in your lives. I know certainly in my career I've been fortunate to have some very good mentors, female mentors on the way through, and what a difference that does make to give you that confidence that you're okay. And we all have, by the way, those same insecurities. At varying degrees, of course, but everybody, male or female. I always think at times, when I think someone is just so fantastic, and then I feel I couldn't be like that. Then you think, well, actually, they're probably just the same. They probably go home and have the same level of insecurities at night as the rest of us, and then boost yourself up again and off you go. Now, we have some questions that the audience actually submitted in advance. It's a bit like Q&A here, isn't it? Tony, eat your heart out. Should age cut-offs for women for grants and other sources of funding be raised by 2 years per child born compared to male applicants? It's radical. Merlin.
So if I answer that, so it's very interesting hearing what Rebecca said about maternity leave. Essentially, we have to remember the whole scientific enterprise is relatively new. It's really a post-war thing, research universities. And we haven't got this fixed term soft money employment correct. We should keep talking about these things. We should work out how to do them, and we've made mistakes and we can improve them. This idea of how do you handle maternity leave, allowing an extra 2 years, I think that's a perfectly good idea. In the US, a lot of the tenure track things, you get 1 year per child. It's a completely arbitrary integer, which is just, we don't really know if it should be 1 year or 3 years, but it's a new game. Start with 2 years for grants. This is done in some various awards. One of the things I've enjoyed today is seeing how many of our women have won scientific awards. Well, I was well aware of it, but it's fantastic. And some of those awards, the age cut-off ones, I think Angela mentioned mid-career and the various different staging careers. And some of those will, if you've had career interruptions, they take that into account. I think that's a perfectly reasonable suggestion.
Very good. So should male and female academics receive incentives to take on female PhD or postdocs, such as extra points per person completed for promotions, an extra $5,000 per year for grant funding?
So, can I...
You're just a bit far
Am I
down
actually
there.
working? Hello.
Yes,
you are.
There you
I am. So I'm actually not sure that taking on more PhDs and more postdocs is where the problem really lies. I think the problem is lying in taking on people into tenured academic positions, at least when we're talking about a university system. So yes, I think heads of schools and deans should have KPIs about increasing the proportion of women academics on permanent positions, and they should be rewarded for doing that. And I think that's something that's been missing, and part of the reason why we're not getting much change. In fact, in some situations we're going backwards. Whether or not it would help, certainly in the School of Biological Sciences, more than 50% of the PhDs are women, more than 50% of the postdocs are women. It does depend on the field of science that you're in as to when the leaky pipeline sets in, and I know it's worse for maths and physics, so perhaps it would help in some areas at that level, but I think it's more important at the continuing position level.
Now we're going to wrap up now. I'm sorry we can't keep going longer, but we have our other panellists in the room, which is very exciting. So very quickly from each of you, your one big tip, Peter.
That I haven't already said.
Or repeat it. Reinforcement is good.
Take your sabbatical.
Take your sabbatical. Great idea. Rebecca.
One big tip. I think that it's important for us to recognise unconscious bias. And I say this from the perspective of a senior female who doesn't have children, who receives comments around that qualify my level based on the fact that I haven't been disadvantaged. Because those, like, oh, but you don't have kids, so you can work 15 hours a day. So I think that kind of language we can do without, and I'm probably guilty of it myself. So I think we need to start, so that's probably a female, directed at being a woman in a senior leadership position, this need to qualify your success because you haven't, followed a traditional pathway. So I think my tip would be to think about your unconscious biases, or if you can, just become aware of the language around trying to at least even that balance.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, just to be supportive of other women in your network as well. Merlin.
So mine is the theme of the day, celebrate your success. There's various ways of doing that. A lot of men are very adept at doing it all the time without actually showing it, and I think we should just celebrate success much, much more.
I can't agree more, which is why there are a number of empty champagne bottles in my office, let me tell you. Any excuse will do. Emma.
I think we've heard this a couple of times, but my suggestion would be to surround yourself with really positive mentors, male and female, and people who are going to tell you to go for things. And when your internal, message and personality says, no, I couldn't possibly do that, ignore them, ignore that internal voice and listen to your mentors. You'll go a long way.
Excellent. Could you please put your hands together for our great panel?